Hello students, today we are going to read the next second lesson from our book Hornbill. We are not afraid to die if we can all be together by Gordon Cook and Alan East. In this story we are going to see that optimism is essential to overcome distress. Whenever there is problem in our life is not easier all the times. There are different difficult times, and that time teaches us how to be together. We can all be together. Togetherness gives us extra strength. It gives us strength to fight. How the narrator's family, the children especially, they gave him strength to fight against the odds of the sea. They struggled against sea water. They were caught in a difficult situation, but they survived ultimately. And this was because of their courage, their proper planning, their togetherness. The story goes like this. They went on a sea voyage. The narrator, along with his family, started the sea voyage. You can say they wanted to duplicate the round the world voyage that was made by Captain James Cook 200 years earlier, and likewise the writer wanted to go on a voyage, and so his planning was that, he says, in July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan, 6 years old, and daughter Suzanne, 7 years old, and I set sail from Plymouth, England, harbour in England. From that place, they started their journey. The idea was to duplicate the journey made 200 years ago by Captain James Cook that I told you. So it is important to note the date and the voyagers. The date is July 1976. July 1976. Voyagers were the narrator, Jonathan, 6 years, So the narrator's age is 37 years old. The narrator is 37 years old, you can see. The wife's age is not given here. He was a businessman, and they had planned it for 16 years, and they were busy in honing our seafaring skills. Seafaring, moving in the sea, and honing means expertising their skills. Our boat, Wave Walker, the description is given. The boat was, Plymouth is in England. They started in the Wave Walker is the boat. 23-meter, 30-ton wooden hull Beauty had been professionally built, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. So it was all planned very nicely. The first leg of our planned 3-year, 105,000 kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. So from England to Africa, they crossed the journey. The first leg they called, the first step, the first part of the journey was eventless, that was pleasant, that passed pleasantly. As we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town, there before heading east, we took two crewmen, American Larry Wiesel and Swiss Herb Ziegler. They took two persons, two crewmen, those who could. Crew means the operational staff, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest sea, the Southern Indian Ocean. And Southern Indian Ocean is considered the roughest sea in the world. They were going to pass through, and so they took help of the two persons. The names are Larry Wiesel, who was an American, and another was Herb Ziegler, who was a Swiss person. So with the help of these two crewmen, the narrator decided to cross the Southern Indian Ocean. Our second day out of Cape Town, from Cape Town in Africa, they started their journey. The second leg, we began to encounter strong gales, winds, storms. Gales means storms. Storms. For the next few days, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming, up to 15 meters as high as our main mast. Mast is a part of the ship, the topmost part, which catches air. The waves were alarming, and the storm was not worrying much. December 25th, the Christmas Day, found us 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. Despite atrocious weather, atrocious means cruel weather, we had a wonderful holiday complete with Christmas tree. New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon, and it did change, but for the worse. So this happened with the narrator. In the year they crossed 1977. At dawn on January 2, the waves were gigantic. For a week, the weather worsened, and there was no respite, there was no relaxation, there was no relief. On New Year's Day, he thought the weather would improve, the weather would change, and the narrator ironically says that it did change, but for the worse. But it became more and more fearful. At dawn, what happened? On January 2, the problems started. January 2. We were sailing with only one small storm jib, and we were still making 8 knots, the nautical miles, the distance, the speed of the ship. The main mast, they could not take the help, and with the help of a storm jib, they were sailing. As the ship rose to the top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas rolling towards us, and the screaming of the wind and the spray was painful to the ears. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope in a loop across the stern. Then we double lashed everything, went through our life raft drill, attached lifelines, donned oilskins and life jackets, and waited. When on January 2, the waves became gigantic, the planning was that he tied everything and retied everything, doubly lashed. Last means knotted, tied everything, and they were ready. Donned means they put on, wore oilskins, waterproof jackets, life jackets that they could not, that they could survive in water, and they waited for the worst. The first indication of impending disaster, impending means that was coming near, close, disaster, the ruin came at about 6 p.m. with an ominous silence. The wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. Aft means behind the ship. The weather for some time became calm, but for some time ominous means evil silence that was going to bring bad luck. The sky was overcast with cloud and a growing roar, loud sound from behind came. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud but a wave like no other I had ever seen. A great wave which covered the sky like a cloud was coming from behind that I had never seen. It appeared perfectly vertical and almost twice the height of the other waves with a frightful breaking crest, top part, frightful breaking crest of the wave. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up and the face of the wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it, but then a tremendous explosion shook the deck. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. I thought the wave would lift the ship, but it broke on, it fell on, it dropped on the ship. That was the disastrous thing that ruined the ship. There came the problem. There started the problem. It broke the ship. The great wave broke the ship in the evening. And the torrent of green, torrent means the great. Torrent means a powerful movement of water, of green and white water, broke over our ship, and my head smashed into the wheel, and I was aware of flying overboard and sinking below the waves. I accepted my approaching death, and the narrator was thrown out of the ship. First it was so heavy, it shook the ship so heavily, and the narrator was thrown out of the ship, and he accepted his death. He was in water. I was losing consciousness. I felt quite peaceful. Means forgetful of everything. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of water. A few meters away, wave walker was near capsizing. Capsizing means drowning. Just overturning, turning upside down. Her mast almost horizontal. It was lying horizontal on water. Wave walker was near capsizing, mast almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright, make it straight. Another wave, make it straight. And I was linked with the boat, so my lifeline jerked out. My lifeline, the strong rope that tied me, jerked, and I grabbed the guardrails and sailed through the air into wave walker's main boom. Subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. The strong winds moved me, twisted me like a doll in the wind, and I was able to go into the deck. My mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. Somehow I found the wheel. I lined up the stern for the next wave and hung on. Somehow, suddenly I came back and found the steering wheel to move the ship. I lined up the stern, the back side of the ship, and waited for the next storm. Water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. The ship was flooded with water, but I had no time. I was engaged with the wheel. That was the most important decision to take, to control the ship, to control the wheel that steered the ship. And I turned the backside in front of the wheel. Suddenly, the front hatch was thrown open and Mary appeared. Hatch is the opening inside the cabin where from the captains move the ship, they steer the ship. Mary, my wife, appeared. We are sinking, she screamed. The decks are smashed, broken, we are full of water. Take the wheel, I shouted, and I scrambled for the latch Larry and Herb were pumping like midnight. I told my wife to control the steering wheel and I went inside when Mary informed me and I found my crew members, Larry and Herb, they were pumping like madmen, broken timbers, hung at crazy angles. The condition of the boat is now damaged. The whole starboard side bulged inwards, clothes, crockery, charred stains and voices lost about in deep water. They were just floating. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. Are you all right? I asked. Yes, they answered from an upper bunk. Bunk, like in the train you see, the fixed beds, bunk. But my head hurts a lot, said Sue. Suzanne, short name for Sue, and John. Sue. My daughter said, my head is giving me problem. It is somewhere hurt, injured. But I had no time worry about bumped heads because it was more important to save the boat and thereby save the lives of everyone. First, it was important to save the boat. After finding a hammer, screws and canvas, I struggled back on deck with the starboard side bashed upon. We were taking water with each wave that broke over us. Water was coming with each wave. If we couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. The boat was about to sink. That was in the danger. Somehow I managed to spread the canvas, waterproof clothes over it, and secure waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the sides. It was now most of the water was now deflected, means removed, prevented from coming inside the boat. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with the debris. Debris means the wastage or the rough, you can say, things that are coming with water, debris. The pumps circuited, the pumps stopped working, the water level rose threateningly. Threateningly means it was now above the danger level. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard. They were wrenched means thrown overboard, along with the forestay sail, the jibe, and the dinghies and the main anchor. Many of the instruments, many of the things, they were thrown upwards. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. I connected it to an out pipe and that I was thankful to find that it worked. So it was necessary to pump out water and he was very happy to find, he was thankful to God. He thanked God that this pump worked. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the radio. We were getting no replies to our mayday calls. Mayday calls means help us, call mayday calls. SOS messages, save our soul messages, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. They were unanswered. Nobody could hear our cries of help. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she had showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she replied, I didn't want to worry you when you were trying to save us all. This is the attitude of the children, that children behave maturely when in danger. They don't want to disturb the seniors. They want, when they understand the things that father was working busy in some more important work, that was to save the life, that it was to save the boat. By morning on January 3rd, the pumps had the water level sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest in rotation. Now Larry, Herb and I, they all could take rest for 2 hours and in rotation. Each person can take rest for 2 hours. But we still had the tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline, and on checking I found that nearly all the boats' main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. In fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. So the boat was, the wave walker was badly damaged. It was badly damaged. The wooden works were all open and water was coming from somewhere behind. Only a cupboard, means the almirah section, was holding it. Otherwise, there was leakage everywhere. The woods were broken, the frames were broken to the keel, that is the basic structure, basis structure. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but wave walker wouldn't hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. It was the plan to reach Australia, but it was definite that they would not reach Australia in this condition, and surely they have to find some other shelter. Without repair, it was impossible to go to Australia. I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them, Ile Amsterdam, was a French scientific base. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean, pinpricks in the vast ocean, in the big ocean, just the small places, the small islands. The hopes rested in finding those islands. That was the French scientific base I found from the chart. But unless the wind and seas abated means allowed, permitted. But unless the winds permitted, we were not able to, we thought it very difficult even to reach to Ile Amsterdam, the island, French base, scientific base island. Our chances would be slim indeed, very thin chance of survival. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine out of action. So on the 3rd of January evening, January 3rd, on January 4, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of our water inside our boat. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. Keep pace means in the speed that was coming, we have to throw it out in that speed. We could not set any sail on the main mast because the pressure on the rigging would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. Hull means the side of the damaged boat. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the two islands were. I headed towards the Mary Thompson corned beef and cracker biscuits, something called beef, meat, and that was corn, that is cooked with some corn and some biscuits, cracker biscuits. And we had our first meal in almost 2 days. In 48 hours, we had not taken anything to eat. That scanty food was sufficient for survival. There was no time to eat, and there was no, you can say, opportunity. Everything was, the condition was so adverse that food was not important even at that time. But our respite, relaxation, we felt relaxed because water level was very low and we were sailing towards the islands, but our respite relief was short-lived. Another danger was awaiting. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. Within an hour, the wind was back to 40 knots wind speed, and seas were getting higher. And the seas were getting higher, means water level was rising, waves were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5th, dawn means morning of January 5th, our situation was again desperate. Desperate means hopeless. So this is the attitude of the adult. They lose hope easily, but children don't lose hope. When I went into comfort, the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. But Daddy, he went on, we aren't afraid of dying if we all can be together, you and Mummy, you and I. If we all can be together in afterlife or in death, we can be together. And in rebirth, we will be together. I don't fear death. So this was the encouraging word that is the topic of this story. So the small boy's optimism, the small boy's courage was the pioneering force that drove the father to work again. I could find no words with which, so this is an important line, and this was the attitude of the children. That was full of strength and full of optimism that he was giving strength to his daddy. I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had, to protect the vacant starboard side. Vacant means ruined, the broken. I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves. I was ready to face the oncoming waves with the undamaged side of the boat, using an unpowered sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin. That evening, Mary and I sat together holding hands as the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt the end was very near. We feared death. But Wave Walker rode out of the storm, and by the morning of January 6th, but it was good luck that Wave Walker rode out the storm. It survived the storm, and by January 6th, with the wind easing, I tried to get a radio on the sextant. Back in the chart room, I worked on wind speeds, changes of course, drifts and current in an effort to calculate our position. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. In a vast ocean, in a small island was difficult to find, but I decided to find it with the sextant, that is an instrument to decide the position where we were, and in the chart room the directions I made where we were and in what direction we have to go. While I was thinking, Sue moved painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen, and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. Only the slits, gaps were visible. She gave me a card she had made. You see, Jonathan had encouraged him, and Suzanne now presented a card she had made. On the front, she had drawn caricatures of Mary and me. Parents, here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh? I laughed a lot as well. And inside was a message, oh, how I love you both. And the daughter was very thankful. She was expressing her love, and this also gave me a strength. So this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. So this is optimism again from the children's side. Somehow we had to make it, I determined. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass. In this way we can see we can all be together. So there is more strength in togetherness. So I rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass, and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variations. And the compass was not in much use. I made an allowance for this. Allowance means I took into consideration for the differences it would make, and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m. I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degrees, to take that course, to take that path 185 degrees in that direction, giving the direction in the degrees. We were lucky. If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction. Conviction means a strong opinion, a strong belief. I did not feel. I was not sure. I was not saying with surety, but I suggested he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. He would be near to that island if I was right in my calculations. So this was only 3 hours distance, only within 3 to 4 hours they could be near the island. This was my calculation. Then with a heavy heart I went below, climbed on my bunk and amazingly dozed off. I fell asleep suddenly, amazingly, surprisingly, in such disastrous conditions, in such you can say tense situation also, sleep knows no limits. I fell asleep. I was so exhausted maybe. When I woke, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island. I was cursing myself that I had made mistaken calculation. That's why we had not reached the island. And with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. At that moment, a tousled head appeared by my bunk. Just, can I have a hug? Jonathan asked. She was right behind him. So the children came and they wanted to embrace me, they wanted to hug me, they wanted to love me, come in my bosoms. Why I am getting a hug now? I asked. Because you are the best daddy in the world and the best captain. Just, my son replied, not today, John. I am afraid I have failed in my calculations. I have not found the island for you. We are not safe yet. Why? You must be, said Shu in a matter-of-fact voice. You found the island. What? I shouted with surprise and the ecstasy, the joy, greatest joy. I was overwhelmed. The island was visible. It's out there in front of us. They chorused. They said jointly, as big as a battleship. It was not a big island, but it was as big as a battleship, 65 meters. That surface area is given. I rushed on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Ellensterdam. It was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock with little vegetation, no flower, no grass, no plantations. The most beautiful island in the world, but it was most beautiful because I loved the island more than anything in my life, because that was a life-sustaining place for us, the island. We anchored offshore for the night, and the next morning we anchored offshore. We came out of the boat and waited for the night at the shore. And the next morning, all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. With land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie, cheerful and optimistic. Here the word is given optimistic. Optimism is necessary for all the crew members. Strength, optimism, planning, perseverance, the capacity to bear trouble and torture, not to get disturbed in problems, to bear stress. They were all stayed with the field for all those crucial, important hours. Most of all, I thought of a 7-year-old girl who had not want us to worry about a head injury. The head injury was really deep because afterwards, when I came, the subsequently took 6 minor operations, and that was not an easy injury. But she did not bother us. But she tolerated everything, and tolerance is also important. Remove a recurring blood clot between the skin and skull. And of a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die. So the children and my crew members, they gave me a strength, and as a captain I became victorious. So victory comes to those who have a strength, who have optimism, and who are not perturbed by the troubles in life. Troubles come, and even there is risk of life, but optimism can beat everything. So this is the message. And adult attitude is that of hopelessness. They surrender in difficult situations, but children, they are optimistic, they are joyous, and they give us strength to face troubles in life, and we move ahead. Life is facing troubles. That's the end of the lesson. Thank you.